shore from here, go to Bermuda. We've got Mike Seidel standing by. He is under a hurricane warning. And the last time I talked to you, Mike, I said, hey, listen, you're going to be on the beach. I'm going to be on the beach. I think my day is going to be a little bit worse. How does it look for you right now in Bermuda?
Well, I'm watching and listening to you, and I'm like, oh, my gosh. Now, you've got some weather. We're going to get some weather eventually, but You're gusting 50 miles an hour. We're gusting about 20 miles an hour right now, Bob Van Dillen. And here we are back, Southampton Parish at the Pompano Resort. We were down on the beach yesterday. By the way, from the beach to the lobby, 75 steps, Bob. And I did that about, I don't know how many times. Boy, I felt that in my calves this morning. But you can see how high the building is built up on the cliff. So the surge is not an issue. Now, last year, or I should say earlier this year, the water did come over the concrete abutment there and then touched it and touched the bar at the bottom of the bar. So that's not out of the question, because high tide at 4 o'clock, we'll see the water hitting that concrete. That's a given. Right now, the wave heights here inside the reef are running at about 2 feet, 1 to 2 feet. We're expecting those to come up to about 5 to 8 feet as they peak late tonight and Friday morning with Hurricane Melissa. Now, Melissa still is 430 miles away. The forward speed from Bermuda, the forward speed has increased from the 2 p.m. observation now, moving northeast at 30 miles an hour versus 24 miles an hour. But I calculated the forward speed again for you. From 8 p.m. tonight Eastern to 8 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning, it's going to be moving at 44 miles an hour. So it's still going to increase about 50%, almost 50% on the nose. What does that mean? The timing? The worst of the weather will get here later this evening. So say from about 9 p.m. to about 2 or 3 in the morning, the center is going to go by off the coast, and a rough calculation, taking the line down the center of that narrow cone now that it gets closer, about 115 miles off the coast. So that puts us on the edge of the tropical storm force winds, which are 39 miles an hour. So that gives you an expectation of what kind of gusts we may have, 50 to 60 miles an hour. And I said yesterday, too, I want to reemphasize, I can't imagine this being any worse than Imelda was back the first couple of days of October, when the winds gusted at the airport up around 60 miles an hour. There's some power outages and there was some tree damage. But right now, look at this. The sun is coming out. Winds are running southeast at the airport about 15 to 18 miles an hour. Temperatures up there right around 80. And it's just a beautiful day. It's hard to believe that this Category 2 hurricane is steaming our way. But again, it's going to get here quickly, 430 miles an hour. If you divide that by 40, that's about 10 hours, a little over 10 hours, but it's not moving at 40 yet. So we're thinking 10 to 12 hours from now, it goes off to our west and north. By 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, after sunrise, the center of Melissa is going to be nearly 400 miles north of here. So it's going to be long gone. The sun's going to come back out, still be a bit breezy in the morning. And Bob, I checked the latest. This is interesting, too, as far as rainfall. When storms move fast, you don't tend to get a lot of rainfall. You get less than if they're slow movers, because we've seen tropical storms and depressions that just crawl and can dump 30 to 35 inches of rain. But with this one, last night's European ensemble mean rainfall for Bermuda was a quarter inch. So I'm thinking, okay, what about the morning update? Well, we don't have the European in yet, Bob, but we have the 12Z, the morning run of the American model, the GFS, and it is printing out, now this is the operational, not the ensemble mean, it's printing out a quarter to a half an inch of rain. All the rain, the heavier rain, is going to stay off to our west. So although the strongest winds extend farther out on the east side, the heavier rainfall totals are going to be on the west side of the center. So rainfall is not going to be an issue here. It's just a question now how much wind we get as it goes by here later on this evening. We're going to be right here on Fox Weather.
Yeah, I love watching you out there, and this one's going to be a shave and a haircut. It's going to go right past it very quickly, but you know you're going to be up there. We're going to see what kind of action you can get with the nice spiraling rain bands that may get through there. Mike Seidel up there in Bermuda. Great to see you, my friend. Good report always.
Mike Seidel is in Bermuda now. Mike, it's the fourth go-around this season for folks there in Bermuda. Nothing too bad, but that's still a little much in one season.
A lot of prep, or a lot of thinking about prep. But you know what they did here at the hotel, the Pompano? They decided to cut back on the prep because I told them it's not going to be any worse than Imelda, and they felt that they went a little too far and it gets more involved when you have to zip tie things in and move heavy planters. So they've done some basic prep down here on the beach. They've piled up the beach chairs against the beach bar right here. By the way, the water during Imelda got up to those chairs, up to that level of the beach bar. So that wouldn't be surprising. High tide yesterday, the water got up to the concrete there, and we are now about an hour and 15 minutes from high tide. The water just looks delightful, that aquamarine tropical water. We've got some of the many golfers. There's 140 golfers, 68 couples in the tournament. They got through round 3, and they're going to get through round 4 tomorrow here, out there in the water, enjoying the temperatures in the upper 70s. And the reason they're celebrating is gentlemen out there had a hole-in-one today. Lots of proof from a lot of eyeballs, but no video proof, so we'll take his word for it. So we look offshore. There's the sun through the overcast up there. You can barely see it. But offshore, you can see a little bit of a line there. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but there are some showers offshore. Oh, there's a windsurfer. Can we catch that windsurfer out there, Victor? There's a windsurfer out there right about where the water drops off into the harbor, way out there. You can walk out there at low tide. It never gets more than about 5 or 6 feet. Nice bathymetry here for swimming and vacationing. What I wanted to mention is the problem we have here in Bermuda right now is the radar here is down. It's been down most of the past 3 weeks. I heard they were trying to get some parts over here and get it fixed. So we're kind of flying blind as far as what's immediate, what's coming at us. We have satellite imagery, of course, but we can't see individual cells or bands really coming at us at this point. So we'll see how that plays out. But I did look at the latest run of the European from this morning. It's printing out about a ½ an inch of rain, plus or minus, from the storm. The American model about a ¼ inch to a third of an inch. So the bottom line is the heavier rainfall totals are going to stay to our west. Tonight, the closest approach with the track of Melissa is still likely to be at least a low-end Cat 2, if not a high-end Cat 1 hurricane. It's going to pass by here offshore to our west and then off to our northwest and then move out of the way around midnight, plus or minus a few minutes, half an hour or so. At that point, I measured approximately the distance of about 115 miles away from the coast. So we're going to be on the edge of the tropical storm force winds. Those are winds of 39 miles an hour, sustained or higher. So that gives you perspective. We'll probably get some gusts here in the island, 50 to 60 miles an hour, much like we saw with Imelda. We had some power outages and we had some tree damage, but no major impacts. Along the coast here, we've got a lot of elevation. So a surge, it's not going to be a problem, even if the water comes up a couple of feet down at the beach. But there's plenty of height for most of these buildings here on the island of Bermuda. By the way, from the beach to the lobby, 75 steps is a really good workout. So Ian, we're watching and waiting. It's going to be probably after dinner time before we get some weather in here. But based on the models, we're not going to get a lot of rain. And you know, if you don't get the tropical squalls, you don't get the strongest gusts, because those strongest gusts are contained in those bands, those tropical bands. So it'll be interesting to see how many or if we get any here on Bermuda and what kind of wind speed we get. But another brush by following Imelda, Umberto, and Aaron, which was really a non-entity here, just the wave action because it was so far off the coast by about 450 miles.
Yeah, Mike, those 75 steps showing part of the reason why that island is so resilient to tropical systems. But for folks that have been following your reporting the last couple of days, that bar down there is now closed. That's probably a good thing. If there's 60 couples at that event and you make an ace, that could get expensive down at that spot if it was still open.
Well, here's the backstory. I got the details. First of all, the bar down here closes on Halloween. They'll reopen back in March. So they were planning to close Friday anyway. They closed yesterday for the season because of the hurricane coming in tonight and early in the morning. But the bars upstairs on the patio, the restaurant, they're open. And if I showed you what was going on up there, it's quite the scene. We've got about 140 golfers. They came off the course. It was a shotgun start, and they're now kind of quenching their thirst and getting some food. And the gentleman who had the hole-in-one bought a few drinks, but I did hear a couple of other golfers. They're not listening. I heard a couple of other golfers complain that he didn't buy everybody drinks. But that's 140 golfers. So
it doesn't
he
matter.
Bought a few drinks,
the rules are
the
rules are the rules. The golf gods will punish. That's
right.
Those are the rules. That's it. Fox Weather Storm Specialist Mike Seidel gets bumpy for a few hours later on. We know you'll have us covered. We'll be checking back with you. Thank you. Recovery efforts in Jamaica. And of course, what's still left of this? The impacts still to come. As we mentioned, those are in familiar places. Let's go to a familiar face. Fox Weather Storm Specialist Mike Seidel. He's in Bermuda. Mike, fourth go around. I know, as you said, thankfully this one is in and out. But for a brief period of time, it'll get a little nasty later on this evening and tonight.
It certainly will. A little sporty late this evening and early after midnight tonight. Right now, final preps, minimal preps here at the Pompano. They've just tied down the lounge chairs over there with some yellow rope. And over here, you can see what we're dealing with. We've got our Ethernet cable, thanks to the folks here. We appreciate that so we can broadcast. They piled these up and they've got some string. And then we'll look down at the beach bar where we were yesterday down on the beach. By the way, high tide in the next 15 minutes, and it's coming right up to the concrete there. And they're just kind of tying up the loose ends down there. The water during Imelda did come up on the concrete flooring there outside of the bar, so it may get up there. Surge is not a big issue on the island because look what we have. The kind of topography, very resilient out here because of the cliff-like nature of the coast. So it's impossible really to get water up above these cliffs. That would be like a tsunami. And at this point, we've got waves breaking right here on the beach about 1 to 2 feet. Now there's a reef out there, and that really protects Bermuda from the big waves. The Weather Service here in Bermuda is forecasting wave heights from the reef to the coast about 5 to 8 feet at peak late tonight and early Friday morning. But then beyond the reef, 20-plus footers. So it's going to be certainly dangerous well beyond the reef, and it's going to be dangerous even here because of the water and the wave heights and the wind. So the highest winds expected around midnight, plus or minus. Here's the deal now. It's 370 miles away from us, south-southwest, moving at 2 p.m. Eastern from the hurricane center, northeast, north-northeast at about 30 miles an hour. But between 8 o'clock tonight and 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, the hurricane center forecast track moves it at 44 miles an hour. So it's going to be zipping by here around midnight tonight and then well off out of the way. By tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, it's measured, I checked, 370 miles away from Bermuda. So the weather is going to dramatically improve tomorrow. We've got the fourth round of the couples golf tournament here. They had a great round today. Hardly any rain at all. We had a few spritzes. And we're looking out to the west and southwest, and it's hard to see anything definitive. There may be a few showers in the distance. Our problem here is we're flying blind because the Bermuda Weather Service radar has been down most of October. So we can't see anything close up. We can look at the satellite loop. And Ian, it's going to be coming in here in the next few hours, and by certainly mid-evening, 8, 9 o'clock, we'll have more wind and rain. Right now, the winds at nearby airport, the Wade Airport in Hamilton, southeast sustained at about 16 to 18 miles an hour. So certainly no significant impact yet as far as the wind goes. And it will be a brush by as it rolls by here later on tonight. Rainfall, too. The model's indicating 1/4 to 1/2 an inch. Maybe some spots get 3/4 of an inch because the bulk of the rain is going to stay west, along and west of the track, and the track is going to be moving past us at about 110 or so miles past us and to the west and northwest of us later on tonight. So that's the status, much like Imelda, although Imelda produced wind gusts out here on the north coast at the museum of 99 miles an hour. I don't know if we'll see a wind gust that strong with Hurricane Melissa. A Category 2 now. We'll see what it ranks as it comes by here later on tonight, but preps are done pretty much. The golfers are up at the pool bar, asking me, what hurricane? Where's the hurricane? And I said, it's coming. But remember, 330 miles away, even if you take how far out those tropical storm winds go at about 100 miles or so, it's still well off to our south-southwest. But we will probably get into those tropical storm wind gusts, if not higher, say 50 or 60 miles an hour at some point late evening or a couple of hours or so after midnight tonight here on the island of Bermuda.
Yeah, Mike, I would think so. But as you said, this is going to be going 20 miles per hour over the speed limit in a school zone. Late season storm racing its way by. Wanted to ask you, though, on a personal level, about what folks are saying. I know you had spoke with some of the folks there at that hotel, some of the staff that runs the place. I know it's part of life in Bermuda, but being threatened in any way, shape, or form by 4 storms in like a 2-month period has to be a little frustrating.
It's a lot of work to get things prepared, and as I mentioned earlier, they decided this time, based on what I said, and just looking at the forecast, that I said it's not going to be any worse than Imelda, and the fact that the track has been trending farther west over the past 3 or 4 days, max wind speeds, that they've decided to do the minimal prep like we showed you. We've got the chairs piled up and tied down here at the beach bar, up here on this kind of grassy patio. The pool, they're just going to leave the chairs out for now. They're not going to throw them into the pool like we've seen at many hotels and motels along the beaches for hurricanes, East Coast and Gulf Coast. So they've done what they feel like they need to do, and once everybody gets up tomorrow morning at sunrise, it's going to be long gone. Next stop, Newfoundland. They're going to get some of the wind and rain from Melissa. It will be certainly extra tropical. That's going to be Friday night, tomorrow night, and early Saturday morning. So it goes a long way in 24 hours from here all the way up to Newfoundland. That's how fast it's going to be moving. The jet stream picking it up. And it looks like now, Ian, on the satellite loop, I don't know if you concur with me, that wind is starting to give it a little shear. The tops are getting stretched a little bit more. That's what I'm seeing.
Big time.
And,
yeah.
Yeah, and so what that means is it's not going to strengthen anymore, and it may continue to weaken before it gets close to us later on tonight. But we'll be here through this evening, give you an idea, and I've got my rain gear ready if it actually rains. I can't imagine won't get a few rain showers, but we don't have the radar in operation, and if we don't get the tropical squalls because maybe we're too far west, or too far east rather, that means we may not get the strongest wind gusts because those are contained in those tropical rain bands.
Yeah, we hope that trend will continue. You gave them the Mike Seidel guarantee, so if they lose any of the beach chairs, you're going to have a bigger bill than the guy that hit the hole-in-one today, Mike.
I'll be back on the mainland before they find me.
Yeah, just like he is, I think. He's already using that strategy. Mike, we're going to be checking back in with you. We are expecting those conditions to deteriorate, and we'll see it with you. That's our storm specialist, Mike Seidel. Thanks. Melissa, it's in the final chapter of it. Mike Seidel is in Bermuda. Mike, the fourth go-around this season. None have been particularly devastating. You had mentioned, though, what was it, Imelda, northern part of the island, got that wind gust almost 100.
Yes, that's the National Museum. That's the far northwest corner of the island. We're farther west than they are, but the island curves around and back up to the north. And they've already recorded a gust of 31 miles an hour. It's not much, I know, but that's the highest gust we've seen so far. Sustained winds are in the low 20s there. Airport winds are running at about 20 miles an hour. No reported high gust at this point. Here's the Atlantic. It's getting a little bit more churned up. The wave heights here coming into this narrow beach at the Pompano Club, about 2 feet. Now we're expecting wave heights from the surf zone to the beach, within the surf zone, I should say within the reef zone, in the surf zone, should be running about 5 to 8 feet during the peak. That would be late tonight through Friday morning, and then beyond the surf zone, and I should say reef again, the reef zone, we're looking at 20 to 30 footers. Again, that's way out there, but we have the reef protecting the island of Bermuda. We also have a lot of high elevation cliffside buildings, homes, condos, and as we pan around here, you can see what I'm talking about, that the surge is not an issue. Now, the beach bar down here is closed. They've now got all the chairs stacked up and tied down. That's all they're doing. They're not going to do as much prep as they did with Imelda because they said they over-prepared, which is not bad. Now, the water did just touch the wall there at high tide about 45 minutes ago, and it may go up and over, but the next high tide is after Melissa passes the island around midnight tonight. The next high tide about 4:30, 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. So again, surge, not a concern. Rainfall at this point, not a concern. All the models indicating a half an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch from the system because it's going to be so far west. Those bands, the meteor bands will stay west of us. That is the forecast. Expecting the storm, as I mentioned, about 100, 115 miles off to the west, and then northwest it goes off in that direction. Right now, it's hard to see if there's any rain showers out there, and we are running blind. As I mentioned, the Bermuda Weather Service radar has been out of order, not functioning most of October, which is not good, especially if it was a severe weather situation. And the advantage back on the mainland, the continental U.S., is we have multiple Dopplers, so if one is down, we have overlapping. But here we have the one radar, and we're just going to have to basically do an observation. Here it comes, and we can see the bands coming in from the satellite perspective, but that's not as good as the bird's eye view of a Doppler radar. So Ian, everything is tied down here, and we'll see how windy it gets. Imelda with a peak gust, as you mentioned, 99 out at the National Museum. The airport gusted to about 60 miles an hour. There were some power outages, and the peak rainfall was about 1.3 inches. But right now, it doesn't seem like we're going to get a whole lot of rainfall out of this as it goes by. And by about 8 o'clock tomorrow morning Eastern, the projected location is about 400 miles well away, well off to the north of the island. So this will be out of here in round 4 of the couples golf tournament here at the hotel. I'm certain will be played with no problems tomorrow. They're going to move the shotgun start back a little later from 8:30 though, just to be on the safe side. It will be breezy in the morning though at sunrise.
Yeah, round 4 of the golf after round 4 of dealing with a close approach of a tropical system. But Mike, I'm looking at this bulletin, this 5 p.m. advisory from the NHC. Still the winds at 105 miles per hour, they have it, but it's motion northeast at 31 miles per hour. So this is racing toward you. But we talked about how the tropical structure is coming undone. Eyeball test, it does appear as though you get a brief, pretty good push of some bad weather rolling through.
Yeah, brief and right on the edge. I calculated the forward motion, I think I just mentioned that, about 40 to 45 miles an hour between this evening and tomorrow morning. So it's going to increase even more its forward speed and race on by here. So whatever we get will not last very long, but when you have a forward speed like that, it does tend to increase the gusts. It's all a function of those tropical rain bands. Do they get as far east as where we are or not? And if not, we get some rain and some wind, but those strongest winds are in those bands, especially when you're away from the core and the eye wall in those areas. It's those outer bands that come through, and you can actually feel the wind and the coolness, and then the rain comes lashing at you literally seconds later. So those are the ones we're going to be looking at to see if they get on shore and we can get some gusts, 50 or 60 miles an hour. But without radar, Ian, it's basically I'm going to be sitting here late tonight with my video camera, my smartphone, and just waiting and watching, see if I can grab anything so we can have that to use on Fox Weather first thing tomorrow morning at 5 a.m.
Yeah, going old school, going analog with what's left of Melissa as it moves on by. One bad night in Bermuda, that's the man that'll show us what it looks like. Fox Weather Storm Specialist Mike Seidel, thank you. It's the final.
With strong winds and heavy rain expected as Melissa passes just to the northwest. Fox Weather's Mike Seidel is in Southampton Parish, Bermuda, with the latest. And Mike, we know this thing is approaching. How's it been for you throughout the day so far?
It has been uneventful. In fact, everybody's staying here, all the golfers here for the couples championship. These are not professional golfers. They're having a great time, but they're wondering where's the hurricane? And I know it's taking a long time to get here. Remember, it's moving very fast now. Steve, you've got the latest update at 7 p.m. Eastern. I didn't get a chance to see it. And down here, I have no Wi-Fi, so you can get me an update. But a forecast to move by here off to the west and then northwest around midnight tonight, give or take a half an hour or so, and expected to be moving at that point about 40 to 44 miles an hour forward speed. And by tomorrow morning at sunrise, it's going to be about 400 miles past Bermuda. So round 4 of their little golf get-together will be fine tomorrow. Now, there'll be some wind in the morning, and the airport is closed now until tomorrow morning. So some of those morning flights, I know some of the morning flights coming in and going out before noon have been canceled, but everything after about 11 o'clock seems to be on schedule. And at this point, I can't imagine there's going to be any major impacts at the airport. I've been talking about the worst case being Imelda, and that was early in October. The museum, the Bermuda Museum out here, the National Museum, peaked at 99 with a gust. Now, I just checked their observation, and they have gusted to 34 knots, 39 miles an hour, and that is tropical storm force right at the baseline, but that's a gust, not sustained, and they are elevated. Over at the airport, the observations over there, gust around 30 miles an hour, sustained winds about 20 to 22 miles an hour. Where we're standing down here in this cove, we are surrounded. You can see the terrain here, very steep, a lot of coral, a lot of rock. So we are blocked from the wind. Later on this evening, we may go up to the pool deck if we get some rain to keep the camera dry, and it's much windier up there. So down here, the winds are very, very light as we're in this protective kind of cove. The waves have ramped up a little bit. These are about 2 to 3 footers, mostly 2 footers. Remember, there's a big reef around Bermuda which protects them from the monster waves. Beyond the reef, later tonight and Friday morning, the Weather Service here predicting wave heights 20 to 30 feet. But with a reef, that knocks everything back down, and that keeps this area safe. Also, with the way the topography is, storm surge is not an issue. Now, this afternoon, late this afternoon at high tide, the water did come up right up here to the concrete, and that will be expected maybe tomorrow morning. But the next low tide is going to be, or the next high tide is going to be after Melissa passes by Bermuda at about 4:30 in the morning. Next low tide's coming up here in about 3.5 hours. So surge will take that off the table. And the rainfall, that's a good question too. But we've been looking at the models, the European, the American model, and both of them are saying that the island on average is going to get a half an inch of rain. Maybe somebody gets 3/4 of an inch, maybe somebody gets less. But it's all a function of any of these far out, these extended tropical rain bands come over the rain gauges here on Bermuda. We're going to be on the eastern side, and looking at the track, it's roughly going to be about 110, 115 miles off the coast. So it's kind of a brush by. Wind gusts 50 to 60, not out of the question, especially at the museum, which is elevated. And so there could be some power outages. But Steve, right now, it's a pretty quiet evening here on the beaches here in Bermuda. Again, the wind is higher away from these protected surroundings of the cove, but still not a drop of rain yet here at just after 8 p.m. local time here in Bermuda.
Yeah, hey, we're going to be looking at this, Mike, of course. As you had mentioned, there's going to be an advisory that's going to be coming out soon. So overnight, it's going to get rowdy, or later on as well. We'll be watching all of that, and we'll be talking a lot tonight. So, Mike, thank you for kind of giving us that update. We'll check in back with you shortly. But, Kiana, when we look at this, Southampton Parish, Bermuda, and Mike, I think a big thing with this for Bermuda is the fact that, I mean, how many storms have they had so far this season? About 3 of them, and now they got another one that they're going to be hearing tonight.
Well, they had Aaron. They had a tropical storm warning. That was about 450 miles off the coast between here and North Carolina. The only real issue they had were the waves, like we saw on the East Coast. Then they had Imelda. Umberto was really a non-player. It did help steer Imelda away from our coastline, thankfully, and then it came up this way. Now, with Imelda, they were under a hurricane warning, and the National Museum, which is on the northwest tip of the island, the country, gusted at 99 miles an hour. Now, I just checked the latest stop from there. They are now running south-southeast at about 30 miles an hour, 30, 32, and they've gusted to 45 miles an hour. So they're already gusting into the tropical storm force range, which is 39 or higher. And the airports are also running sustained winds of about 22 to 25 miles an hour. They're gusting in the mid-30s miles per hour. So that's where we stand. We've come up a little higher, but I'm still about 50 steps below the pool deck and about 65 steps below the lobby. So that's give you a perspective. We're just built into this kind of, I want to say, cliff. And here's the Atlantic. We were down on the beach earlier. You can see my footprints. And we are starting to get some whitecaps out in the distance. I don't know if you can see those on camera. Those blinking lights are out in the harbor area. You can basically walk out that far. It's very far out there, and the water doesn't drop off very much. I think at high tide, they're telling me 6 or 7 feet. But in the areas from the reef line here, we're expecting 5 to 8 footers. That's the forecast from the Bermuda Weather Service. Beyond the reef line, 20 to 30 footers. Thank goodness we have the reef line. The other thing we don't have is the radar. The Bermuda Weather Service radar has been down most of October. So we're kind of riding blind right now. I'm looking at the infrared radar, Steve, but that doesn't really tell me a lot of exactly when we may get some bands. But looking at the H-Wharf, that's that mesoscale hurricane model you're familiar with, we are going to get some bands in here certainly after about 11 o'clock midnight Bermuda time for a few hours. Then by tomorrow morning, Steve, by about 8 o'clock Eastern, it's about 400 miles past us. It's expected to get as close as about 100 to 110 miles off to the west and northwest a little after midnight tonight. So that's when we'll get the strongest winds. If we don't get any of those bands, then we're not going to get the peak wind gusts because they're pretty much contained in those bands when you get far away from the center.
Yeah, so watching all of this unfold, as you had mentioned, it's the speed at which it's going. The last advisory, it accelerated, and we'll be waiting for that next advisory here in less than a half hour, and I'll be looking forward to kind of unpacking it with you, Mike, as we talk about the anticipation of this arriving. But overall, for Bermuda, a loud night ahead, but minimal impacts. Hopefully we'll talk more. Mike, thank you for that update from Southampton Parish. Let's talk about what we are seeing stateside. We talked about the latest conditions on the ground. Mike, you and I have been talking over the last hour, and the advisory, not much change, just more forward movement, a little faster. How is it for you? It feels like the wind is kind of evolving a little.
Yes, it is. It's slowly ramping up now. We've moved up from the beach because we were so protected. And even here, we're not getting the full force of the wind. The National Museum of Bermuda, which is the far northwest spot on the island, sits up higher, did gust to 99 with Imelda. Now they have gusted to 45. I just checked a few minutes ago, so that hasn't changed in the past half an hour. Sustained winds out there about 30 miles an hour. We've got 3 observation stations on the east side of the island, including the airport, and they've been gusting in the mid-30s. So the winds are slowly ramping up. They're from the south-southeast as the storm approaches. We do not have radar here. The National Weather Service or the National Weather Service of Bermuda it's not working. It hasn't worked basically for several weeks. A little disappointing because we can't really see what's coming granularly. You know, we can see those bands coming in. Now we have to rely on the infrared satellite photos since it's dark, and the storm is heading our way now at about 35 miles an hour, but expected to move faster overnight, later this evening, overnight into Friday morning at 40 to even 45 miles an hour. Right now it's 230 miles west-southwest of Bermuda. And if you do the mathematics with a speed up time, it's going to get here around midnight to 1 or 2 a.m. And that's going to be out that way. Off to the west and northwest, it's going to be out there about 110 to 115 miles, just kind of a back of the envelope calculation I did earlier today, trying to pinpoint where the track is going to be, the center of the cone, and then where we are here on the west side of the island. So it's going to be far enough away that we missed the brunt of those squalls, because the strongest winds obviously are around the center. Now you get those outer tropical bands, Steve, and that's where you can get gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour. Remains to be seen how many of those we get, but the rainfall forecasts from the 2 global models, not much, half an inch to 3/4 of an inch.
Yeah, this is moving so fast, Mike. It's going to be difficult for you to get any of that. It's mainly a wind impact. I want to ask you real quickly, you're on the island. This has been an active season with Bermuda at least getting close to some of these storms. Does it seem like locals are bothered at all, or is this just something that they just take in stride?
Well, they have to take it in stride because, you know, they are out here in hurricane territory, but it is a speck in the middle of the Atlantic. So for them to get a direct hit is pretty tough. But they get brush bys. They had Imelda, as I mentioned, the first couple days of October, and then they had Umberto Umberto did not really cause any impacts here. That moved, remember, west and north, and then Imelda came around. And thankfully for Imelda, thankfully for Umberto, that kept Imelda off the east coast of the U.S. And then they had Aaron, but that was about midway between here and North Carolina, about 450 miles off the coast. So Aaron really was just about waves. Imelda they did prepare for, but we talked to the general manager, the owner here at the Pompano, and he said, looking back, they over-prepared, which is never a bad thing. But this time around, they've gotten all the chairs up, they've got them tied down and stacked, and they're going to be okay. And, we get a wind gust to 50, 60 miles an hour. They can handle this. Everything's up high here, and so surge is really not much of an issue. And I think that's one of the reasons they're so resilient, Steve, is because the way of the topography. Also, we've got the reef, and you can see the blinking lights out there. That's where the harbor, the deeper water starts. Now, beyond that, The Weather Service here, the marine forecast, 20 to 30 footers, but the waves within the reef, inside the reef here, expected to peak out at 5 to 8 feet. Right now we're running at about 3 footers and starting to see some white caps farther out. And by the way, that rainfall, because of our distance, Steve, there's going to be a fair amount of rain, but we're going to be too far east for it. The model's printing out 2 to 3, 4 inches of rain in a swath, but it still is being forecast to stay away from us this time. Now, Imelda, they peaked out at 1.3 inches here on Bermuda. So we're going to keep you updated. It is windier up here, but by and large, nobody's going to complain about this brush by, assuming it pans out as we expect it to do in the next 6 to 7 hours.
Yeah, as we're watching, this is going to evolve quickly. And so thank you, Mike, for the update from Southampton Parish, Bermuda. We'll be talking to you shortly, of course, as that wind kind of throttles up a little bit. But we have to talk about this system we've got stateside, the coastal system, the latest conditions on the ground. Mike, you and I have been talking over the last hour, and the advisory, not much change, just more forward movement, a little faster. How is it for you? It feels like the wind is kind of evolving a little.
Yes, it is. It's slowly ramping up. Now we've moved up from the beach because we were so protected. And even here, we're not getting the full force of the wind. The National Museum of Bermuda, which is the far northwest spot on the island, sits up higher, did gust to 99 with Imelda. Now they have gusted to 45. I just checked a few minutes ago, so that hasn't changed in the past half an hour. Sustained winds out there about 30 miles an hour. We've got 3 observation stations on the east side of the island, including the airport, and they've been gusting in the mid-30s. So the winds are slowly ramping up. They're from the south-southeast as the storm approaches. We do not have radar here. The National Weather Service or the National Weather Service of Bermuda it's not working. It hasn't worked basically for several weeks. A little disappointing because we can't really see what's coming granularly. You know, we can see those bands coming in. Now we have to rely on the infrared satellite photos since it's dark, and the storm is heading our way now at about 35 miles an hour, but expected to move faster overnight, later this evening, overnight into Friday morning at 40 to even 45 miles an hour. Right now it's 230 miles west-southwest of Bermuda. And if you do the mathematics with a speed up time, it's going to get here around midnight to 1 or 2 a.m. And that's going to be out that way. Off to the west and northwest, it's going to be out there about 110 to 115 miles. Just kind of a back of the envelope calculation I did earlier today, trying to pinpoint where the track is going to be, the center of the cone, and then where we are here on the west side of the island. So it's going to be far enough away that we missed the brunt of those squalls, because the strongest winds obviously are around the center. Now you get those outer tropical bands, Steve, and that's where you can get gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour. Remains to be seen how many of those we get, but the rainfall forecast from the 2 global models, not much, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch.
Yeah, this is moving so fast, Mike. It's going to be difficult for you to get any of that. It's mainly a wind impact. I want to ask you real quickly, you're on the island. This has been an active season with Bermuda at least getting close to some of these storms. Does it seem like locals are bothered at all, or is this just something that they just take in stride?
Well, they have to take it in stride because, you know, they are out here in hurricane territory, but it is a speck in the middle of the Atlantic. So for them to get a direct hit, it's pretty tough. But they get brush bys. They had Imelda, as I mentioned, the first couple days of October, and then they had Umberto Umberto did not really cause any impacts here. That moved, remember, west and north, and then Imelda came around. And thankfully for Imelda, thankfully for Umberto, that kept Imelda off the east coast of the U.S. And then they had Aaron, but that was about midway between here and North Carolina, about 450 miles off the coast. So Aaron really was just about waves. Imelda, they did prepare for, but we talked to the general manager, the owner here at the Pompano, and he said, looking back, they over-prepared, which is never a bad thing. But this time around, they've gotten all the chairs up, they've got them tied down and stacked, and they're going to be okay. And, we get a wind gust to 50, 60 miles an hour. They can handle this. Everything's up high here, and so surge is really not much of an issue. And I think that's one of the reasons they're so resilient, Steve, is because the way of the topography. Also, we've got the reef, and you can see the blinking lights out there. That's where the harbor, the deeper water starts. Now, beyond that, the Weather Service here, the marine forecast, 20 to 30 footers, but the waves within the reef, inside the reef here, expected to peak out at 5 to 8 feet. Right now we're running at about 3 footers and starting to see some white caps farther out. And by the way, that rainfall, because of our distance, Steve, there's going to be a fair amount of rain, but we're going to be too far east for it. The model's printing out 2 to 3, 4 inches of rain in a swath, but it still is being forecast to stay away from us this time. Now, Imelda, they peaked out at 1.3 inches here on Bermuda. So we're going to keep you updated. It is windier up here, but by and large, nobody's going to complain about this brush by, assuming it pans out as we expect it to do in the next 6 to 7 hours.
Yeah, as we're watching, this is going to evolve quickly. And so thank you, Mike, for the update from Southampton Parish, Bermuda. We'll be talking to you shortly, of course, as that wind kind of throttles up a little bit. But we have to talk about this system we have stateside, the coastal system. Some of the, wind gusts there in Hamilton starting to pick up as well now for your area of Bermuda.
Yes, and out at the National Museum of Bermuda, which is elevated, and the farthest northwest point, they have now gusted to 49 miles an hour. Remember, they gusted to 99 miles an hour during Imelda. That's an elevated surface, and I was looking at the local weather service forecast, and they're saying that overnight there is a chance that there could be some hurricane-force wind gusts over the elevated exposed surfaces. And I fully agree with that. We're talking a gust to 74 miles an hour. You get elevated and exposed to the open Atlantic, kind of like we are, although we've got cliffs around us, so we're not getting the full brunt of the wind. There's the Atlantic down there coming in through the reef to the beach here, the little lagoon. Just a very nice beach here. Water temperature, by the way, 77, 78 degrees today. Not too bad for almost the 1st of November. There's blinking lights. That is the extension of the reef. That's about 450 yards out there. And you can walk out there at low tide and probably doesn't get any deeper than about 4 or 5 feet. There's a big sandbar here, but the aquamarine water looking good during the daytime. Wave heights are picking up here, but again, the reef protects the island of Bermuda from the big crashing waves for the most part. So wave heights here are expected within the reef zone, 5 to 8 feet later tonight into Friday morning as that swell and wave action comes in from the hurricane Melissa. Out beyond the reef, offshore waters, they're saying 20 to 30 footers, not out of the question. We got a massive hurricane that's generated waves or swell that propagates away over the past several days. Now, the closest pass expected about midnight, 1 a.m. or so Eastern time, and that's going to be off to the west and northwest, about 110 to 115 miles an hour. Just did a general back of the envelope calculation earlier today, Steve. So that's as close as it gets. The models are saying most of the rain and the tropical bands will stay just offshore from here. So the rainfall forecast is not an issue. We're not going to have any surge issues. So it's really all about how much wind we get and does that knock out some power, knock down some trees. With Imelda, we did have some trees down and we did have some power outages. There's only 64,000 residents on the island of Bermuda, 64,000. So you can imagine, as far as power customers, what are we thinking? 30, 35,000 power customers at best. So they lost, I think, about 900 to 1,000 customers at one point during Imelda. So, Steve, watching the wind slowly increase as it goes by at about 40 plus miles an hour. It's continuing to speed up. By tomorrow morning, just after sunrise, it's going to be about 400 miles away from us. And tomorrow's going to be a nice day. The winds will die down. It'll still be breezy, but the sun will be out, and temperatures again tomorrow right around 80 degrees. A little bit less humid, I think, tomorrow, although still not dry air like we've seen over the continental United States so far this fall.
Yeah, it just shows you the intensity at which this is moving, but thankfully far enough away that it should remain dry for the most part there in Bermuda, and just another big wind event. Mike, hey, thank you for the update from Southampton. We'll continue, of course, to check in with Mike as that wind steadily builds. We want to talk about now what we've been seeing stateside in the Northeast. Mike, we've been talking all evening, and it seems like the consistent theme is that the wind is slowly starting to arrive.
It is. In fact, the National Museum, which is elevated and high up and exposed on the far northwest corner, just around the bend here in that direction, they have now gusted to 53 miles an hour, sustained wind 43. So they've got tropical storm force sustained winds, not surprising. They gusted to 99 with a sustained wind of 78 during Imelda back in early October. So if we're going to get the strongest wind, it's going to be out there and not back towards Hamilton, where it's not as elevated and as exposed. But even there, we've had gusts over 40 miles an hour around the airport and sustained winds around 30. So the winds are gradually ramping up as the hurricane approaches. It's going to be moving by to our west and then northwest a little after midnight or so tonight, midnight, 1 a.m. But it still seems very likely that the core of the heaviest rain and those tropical bands are going to stay off to the west. Calculating roughly, it's going to be about 110 or so miles west and northwest of the western part of the island when it goes by in the next, say, 3 to 4 hours or so. And then by tomorrow morning at sunrise, it's about 400 miles away from Bermuda. So we'll have leftover wind in the morning, but we'll have the sun back out, and it's round 4. Most everybody staying here at the Pompano Resort are golfers. And they're down here to have fun, to play golf, and they've gotten 3 rounds in. There was concern that they wouldn't be able to play tomorrow, and I told them, don't worry about tomorrow, because it's really going to be out of here, and it is going to be out of here. It remains to be seen how much rain we get, Steve, because the models since yesterday have kept the swath of heaviest rain away from Bermuda, and the trend this week has been for the track of the center to be farther west. So as I mentioned, 110, 115 miles. And right now the models are predicting a ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch of rain. And if we're going to get strong winds, Steve, they're going to be in those tropical rain bands, the outer bands, and we'll see if one goes over one of the anemometer wind vane sites and we get a gust like we did with Imelda to 99 miles an hour, but that remains to be seen. Bottom line, a brush by. They've done some prep here. They piled up the beach chairs and tied them up, and that's it. They're just going to ride it out the next 4 to 5 hours, and then tomorrow it's long gone. Heading up to Newfoundland in those areas, they'll get some wind and rain tomorrow night and early Saturday morning.
Yep,
Steve?
Mike, it's hit the expressway. It's not slowing down. Thank you for the update. We'll check back in with you shortly. Bringing it back stateside, Kiana, we're looking at, of course, Melissa's indirect impact on what happened here in the North. Let's talk more with our Fox Weather storm specialist, Mike Seidel. He's in Southampton Parish, Bermuda, with the latest there. And Mike, of course, we've talked about the wind aspect of this, but what I think is curious is you've been there now for a couple of days. The locals kind of in tune with this and taking this in stride as well.
Yeah, sir, pretty resilient out here, and the island is too, the way the topography is. We got the big cliffs and drop-offs, so that really takes care of a lot of the surge component. And then we've got the reef around the island, but looking out towards that direction, the flashing lights are out there at the edge, about 400 yards out. But look at the white caps now coming in. So the wind is definitely transferring that energy down to the surface of the water. That's how we get waves, the wind energy. And these wave heights are about 3 feet now, 3 to 4. We're expecting 5 to 8 in the reef zone, from the reef to the coast. And then beyond that, 20 to 30 footers. All that swell from Hurricane Melissa now getting set to move by here in the next few hours, probably after midnight. And the closest approach is about 115 miles. That was kind of a calculation I did earlier. It hasn't changed much. It's not exact, but it gives you a rough estimate of how far west it's going to be. Now, the winds have peaked at the National Museum, which is on the far northwest corner of the country. It's not the most northern part of the country, but it's the farthest north and west, and it's elevated and exposed. And they've now gusted to 61 miles an hour. So winds out there have sustained at 40, 45, gusts to 61. That's a pretty good wind, and we'll see if it should ramp up some more. They had a gust to 99 with Imelda, and if we get a hurricane-force wind gust, that would be 74 or higher. That would not surprise me. So we look back here at the beach here. This is where we were yesterday and earlier, and tide is going out. We've got a low tide coming up here in about another half an hour to an hour. Next high tide is after 4 in the morning, and by that point, the hurricane is long gone past the island. In fact, by sunrise in the morning, it's going to be 350, 400 miles way off to the north of the island of Bermuda. How much rain we get? Well, the models, as I've been saying the past day or so, about a ½ inch, give or take, because the heavier rain bands are going to stay off to the west, and that's pretty evident on the infrared picture, Steve. You can see those colder cloud tops now have outraced the center because of the shear. And the other thing is, as I mentioned, the Bermuda Weather Service radar has been down most of October, so we can't really see immediacy where those bands are. You know, you're so used to having that great Doppler radar. And in the States, if one goes down, we have overlapping paths, so we can still cover the area. But here, you're on an island, you've got one radar, and when it's down, you're kind of blind. But we know there are bands out there. We just can't see them coming in. Whether we get a band or not remains to be seen. That's where we get the highest wind gusts. Right now, they're still gusting over 60 without a drop of rain, Steve.
It's been a dry one so far, but as we've talked through over the last several hours, and even now, throughout your shot, Mike, you can see it really starting to enhance, and something that we'll be watching for. Thank you for the update from Southampton Parish, Bermuda. We're going to be continuing to be watching Melissa. Let's talk about some of the travel impacts that we have seen here stateside. Remember, it was an